No husband, no kids, no job. Now what? Is my friend's situation actually tragic? That is absolutely heartbreaking. Honestly, that sounds peaceful.
You can fiercely love the life you currently have while simultaneously grieving the life you didn't get.
So, a few weeks ago, I actually met up with an old friend for coffee. We hadn't seen each other in almost a year, I think.
Oh, wow. That's a while.
Yeah, and at first, it was exactly the kind of catch up you'd expect. We talked about work, family, the just absurd price of groceries right now.
Oh my gosh, do not even get me started.
I know. So we were laughing, complaining about inflation, just keeping it really light.
Yeah.
We ordered another round of coffee. And then, the mood just completely shifted. There was this very long, very heavy silence.
Oh, man.
Yeah. She just stared down at her cup, took this deep breath, and quietly said, I'm 45. No husband, no kids, no job. Now what?
Wow. That is that's a heavy moment to just drop into the middle of a Tuesday afternoon.
It really was. And I've thought about that conversation almost every single day since. Not because those words were melodramatic, but because they were just so painfully ordinary.
Right.
I think millions of you listening right now have asked yourself that exact question or, some version of it in the quiet of your own minds. You just don't say it out loud at Starbucks.
Yeah, what really strikes me about that moment is that she wasn't asking you for an action plan. Like, she wasn't saying, hey, can you fix my resume? Or should I finally download a dating app?
Exactly, no.
She was asking something so much deeper. She was really asking, did I miss my life?
Yeah.
And that is a terrifying question because it has, nothing to do with age and basically everything to do with identity.
That distinction is profound, and that is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to the Living Better podcast. Before we get into the episode, we just want to give a massive shout out to our community.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much for your continuous support. It genuinely means the world to us to build this space with you. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these conversations. So, after that coffee date, I went down a massive research rabbit hole. We gathered a huge stack of sources for this episode. Recent developmental psychology papers, clinical notes on modern grief, sociological studies on identity and societal timelines.
We really dug in.
We did. And our mission today isn't to give you some generic, overly cheerful how to rebuild your life guide. We want to use this research to ask a much more uncomfortable question.
Which is
my friend's situation actually tragic, or have we simply been neurologically and culturally conditioned to feel like it's tragic?
And those are two entirely different realities.
Yeah.
And the research we're pulling from today makes a very strong case that we are basically dealing with conditioning, not objective tragedy.
I saw that immediately when I actually tested the waters with a few other friends. I shared the coffee shop story with them anonymously, of course, and their reactions couldn't have been more polar opposite.
Really? Like how?
Well, one friend looked at me completely devastated and said, that is absolutely heartbreaking. But another friend heard the exact same story, leaned back, and said, honestly, that sounds peaceful.
That contrast is fascinating. I mean, they were given the exact same facts, but arrived at completely different conclusions.
Right. So let's pose a scenario to everyone listening. Imagine two 45-year-old women, exact same circumstances. Neither is married, neither has children, neither has a traditional job right now. One wakes up every single morning feeling incredibly free.
Yeah.
The other wakes up every morning feeling like life completely passed her by. How can both of those realities be true?
Because the biological facts of your life don't create suffering on their own. It's the meaning your brain attaches to those facts.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, we need to look at what developmental psychologists call the social clock. Now, most of you know the basic concept, right? That society hands us this invisible timeline.
Graduate by this age, marry by this age.
Exactly. Buy a house, have children, peak in your career. But what the clinical studies show is how deeply this actually infiltrates our neurobiology.
Right, neurobiology. I always just thought the social clock was, a cultural thing, like annoying relatives asking questions at Thanksgiving.
Oh my gosh, yes. Any special someone. When are you giving us grandchildren?
Exactly. It's so much pressure. But are you saying it actually changes how our brains physically function?
Yes. And that is where the research gets really interesting. Your brain operates primarily as a prediction machine. Its entire job is to predict what's going to happen next so it can keep you safe and basically conserve energy.
Okay.
So from childhood, we absorb this timeline from movies, our parents, our peers. Nobody hands you a literal syllabus, but your brain builds a predictive model based on this cultural script.
Okay, so I internalize the timeline and my brain sets it as the default expectation. What happens when I hit 35 or 45 and my life looks nothing like that prediction?
Your brain registers what neuroscientists call a prediction error. When reality violently deviates from your internalized predictive model, your nervous system interprets that discrepancy not just as a casual disappointment, but as a literal threat. It spikes your cortisol. It triggers your fight or flight response. So the distress, my friend, and honestly, so many of you are feeling, doesn't actually come from the reality of being single or unemployed. It comes from your nervous system panicking over a massive prediction error.
That is a massive paradigm shift. You aren't hurting because of what you have or don't have. Your nervous system is sounding an alarm because you believe you are, off schedule.
Exactly.
The pain isn't necessarily, I don't have a husband or children. Sometimes the pain is simply, I always thought I would.
Which brings up a really necessary nuance here.
Yeah.
If we look at the sociological data we reviewed, we have to hold space for both sides of this coin.
Right.
There are women who never wanted a traditional path,
Yeah.
who built incredible unconventional lives, and they feel deeply biologically fulfilled. That is authentic.
For sure.
But there are also people who desperately wanted that traditional path, and life just, unfolded differently.
Yeah.
We cannot dismiss their pain because their prediction error is very, very real.
My friend at the coffee shop is the perfect example of that. She wasn't pretending to be utterly devastated, but she wasn't pretending to be perfectly fine either.
Yeah.
She was carrying the ambiguity of both. And that makes me wonder if the pain comes from missed expectations and this neurological prediction error. How do we actually process a loss that never actually happened?
The clinical term from our sources is disenfranchised grief.
Disenfranchised grief.
Yeah. This is a type of grief that society doesn't recognize because, technically speaking, there is no physical loss.
I mean, I want to push back on that a little, or at least clarify.
Sure. Because when someone loses a loved one, there's a funeral, there are markers, people drop off casseroles, the community physically gathers to validate the loss. And human brains actually require those external physical rituals to update our internal cognitive maps.
Oh, interesting.
When someone dies, the funeral is the biological signal to your limbic system that a transition has occurred. But there are no funerals for the children you never had.
Wow.
There are no casseroles dropped off for the future you thought you were going to build. You were essentially mourning a phantom future.
We aren't always grieving the biological reality of a partner or a child. We are grieving the narrative we constructed.
You're grieving the Sunday morning breakfasts, the chaos of Christmas mornings, a full dinner table. You're mourning the fantasy.
Yeah.
And because there is no social ritual for letting go of a fantasy, your brain's map doesn't update. It leaves you in a chronic state of ambiguity. This is why you feel so stuck.
So what's the actual takeaway for the listener here?
The takeaway is that it is entirely normal to hold this ambiguity. You can fiercely love the life you currently have while simultaneously grieving the life you didn't get. You do not need society's permission to mourn an imagined future. The lack of acknowledgement from the world is what breeds shame, but your nervous system's response is entirely valid.
Okay, so we've established what we grieve, that phantom future. But I want to dig into why it shatters us so deeply. One of the psychological papers in our stack talks about how this feels like the floor falling out from under us.
Yeah.
Why is the pain of an unlived future so completely destabilizing?
Because you aren't just losing a dream, you are losing your cognitive architecture. The research calls this identity foreclosure. It happens when you commit to one specific version of your future so totally that you stop imagining any other possible versions of yourself.
How does that actually work mechanically in the brain? Like, why do we foreclose on our identity like that?
It comes back to cognitive load. Your brain consumes roughly 20% of your body's energy. So to save metabolic energy, it creates shortcuts.
Yeah.
Instead of constantly calculating hundreds of potential futures, your brain creates a rigid, singular avatar of your future self.
Ah.
It says, I am a future mother, or I am a future CEO.
Mhm.
Once it locks that in, it prunes away alternative pathways.
So, when life changes direction, it doesn't just feel like you have to switch to plan B. Your
Mhm.
brain literally doesn't have the neural pathways for a plan B.
Okay.
It feels like your very self has been erased.
Yes,
Hmm.
you lose the energetic shortcut. Your brain suddenly faces massive cognitive overload, trying to map a future it never prepared for.
That explains so much. I mean, I was reading through the case studies we pulled, and the people going through this rarely describe themselves merely as unmarried or unemployed.
Right.
The universal word they use is lost. They constantly say, I feel lost. And now it makes sense. They aren't looking for a spouse or a job. They're literally lacking a predictive model for who they are. They're looking for themselves.
Which raises a crucial point for anyone listening who feels that way today.
Hmm.
The core of your struggle right now is not about figuring out how to get your old life back.
Right.
It is about figuring out who you would be if you finally stopped trying to become the person you imagined you'd be when you were 25.
I love that. But I also want to challenge some of the typical advice we see around this. In the stack of articles we reviewed, the word resilience is just everywhere.
Yes.
Just be resilient. Build your resilience. You noted in the margins of one of those papers that you actually hate that word. I always thought resilience was the ultimate goal.
Well, I do take issue with how resilience is culturally framed, and the newer clinical data actually supports this hesitation.
How so?
Resilience, by its actual engineering definition, means bouncing back to your original shape after being compressed or stretched.
Like a rubber band.
Exactly. But human beings don't bounce back. You cannot go back to the person you were before the loss, before the prediction error.
That makes a lot of sense.
Telling someone to just be resilient often translates to toxic positivity, like, just smile through the pain and pretend you aren't forever changed.
Wow, okay. So if resilience is a flawed framework because it basically demands we return to an old shape, what is the alternative? What's the psychological tool that actually helps us rebuild?
The alternative is psychological flexibility. This is a concept gaining massive traction in behavioral science.
Mm-hmm.
It is the ability to fully accept your reality without letting that reality rigidly dictate who you become. You don't bounce back, you expand around the pain.
Accepting reality without letting it decide who you become. You know, my grandfather used to give me this profound piece of advice when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
He would say, never confuse what happened to you with who you are.
Oh, that is beautiful.
I was like 10, so I had no idea what he meant at the time. I thought he was just being cryptic. But it's exactly this. He was describing psychological flexibility, detaching the event from your core identity.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it and incredibly accurate to the psychology. It ties directly into the literature on post-traumatic growth.
Right.
But we need to be very careful not to romanticize suffering here. Hardship does not automatically make you stronger. Hardship can break you.
Right. Trauma is just trauma.
Exactly. Experience itself is not the teacher. Reflection on the experience is the teacher.
That's a huge distinction.
Psychological flexibility requires you to actively reflect and engage with the new reality, rather than just passively enduring it and hoping you magically level up. In fact, there's a principle in behavioral activation theory that states the opposite of depression isn't happiness.
What is it?
The opposite of depression is engagement.
That is a massive paradigm shift for me because we constantly tell ourselves we need to feel good before we do something. Like,
Yes.
once I feel confident again, I'll start dating. Once I feel confident, I'll apply for that career change. We view confidence as the prerequisite for action.
And the dopamine mechanisms in your brain work in the exact opposite way. You
Hmm,
cannot wait for confidence to take action.
really?
Confidence is a trailing indicator. It is the reward your brain gives you after you take action and survive it. Rebuilding doesn't start with suddenly feeling joyful or confident. It starts with just showing up.
So let's pivot to the practical side of this. We've talked about prediction errors, the neurobiology of grief, psychological flexibility.
Yeah.
If someone is sitting in their car right now, listening to this episode, feeling totally off schedule and lost, how do they actually practice this engagement? The sociological papers we reviewed highlighted a few core questions that facilitate this shift, right?
Yes. Rebuilding your life doesn't start with burning everything down, moving to a new city, or losing 20 pounds. It starts with highly specific internal inquiries designed to update your brain's map.
Let's talk about the first one, which honestly hit me pretty hard when I was reading the notes.
I'm curious.
The question is, what are you refusing to let go of? It immediately reminded me of a time I was cleaning out my closet. I found all these clothes I hadn't worn in like 8 years.
Oh boy.
And for every single shirt, I had a rationalization. I'll wear this when I lose 10 pounds. I'll wear this when this specific style comes back. I suddenly realized I wasn't keeping clothes. I was keeping old versions of myself. I was refusing to let go of the guy I was a decade ago.
That is such a perfect metaphor.
Grr.
Because we do the exact same thing with our life plans. You keep the phantom future in your mental closet, hoping it fits again one day.
Right.
Which naturally leads into the second realization from the research,
Yeah.
identifying where these plans came from in the first place.
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself, who taught me what success was supposed to look like?
That is huge because so often we are carrying inherited dreams. We're agonizing over not achieving a goal that we didn't even organically set for ourselves. Our nervous system is panicking over a timeline that was entirely authored by our parents, our culture, or some arbitrary standard we saw on social media.
Once you realize the dream might not even be yours, it forces a bit of an identity crisis, which brings up another confronting question from the sociological data.
Which is,
Who are you when nobody is introducing you?
I had to sit with that one for a while. We just confuse our societal roles with our core identity all the time. I'm a manager, I'm a husband, I'm a mother. Those are introductions. But if those roles are stripped away or if they never materialize, who is the person underneath?
And if you don't know the answer, that's why you feel so lost. Your entire identity is tied up in external validation.
Yeah.
And when you start figuring out who that internal person is, you have to change how you view time. Stop asking what the next 10 years look like and start asking, what kind of Tuesday do I want?
I really love that reframe. We constantly fantasize about these grand decades. Like, in my 40s, I'll have the house on the hill.
Right.
But life isn't lived in decades. Life is lived on a random, rainy Tuesday. It's ordinary lunches, traffic jams, and average mornings.
Yeah.
Stop trying to architect a perfect decade and start designing a Tuesday you actually enjoy waking up for.
And the final piece of the puzzle, tying back to behavioral activation, is asking yourself, what's one action my future self would thank me for today?
Today, not next year.
Right. It's about the power of not abandoning yourself for one more day. Just one action. Sending one email, taking one walk, making one phone call. That is how you generate the confidence to keep going.
So, bringing this all together, when we started this episode, I thought we were going to be talking about starting over, like how to get back on the horse when things go wrong.
Right.
But reflecting on everything we've unpacked, from the brain's prediction errors to disenfranchised grief, this wasn't really about starting over at all. It was about granting you, the listener, permission to stop measuring your real, breathing, messy life against a fictional one that only exists in your head.
It is entirely about permission. And, when people hear that phrase your friend used at the coffee shop, no husband, no kids, no job, they almost always get stuck on the word no.
Yeah, they focus entirely on the deficit.
But the most important word in her entire confession wasn't no. The most important word was now. Now what?
Wow.
Life isn't behind schedule because there is no universal timeline. Now is the only place you actually have power.
I want to leave you all with a final thought today, something that builds on our sources but frames it in a completely different light.
Okay.
Consider that this social clock, we've all been agonizing over this rigid timeline of school, production, family, and retirement. It wasn't even designed for human happiness.
Really?
If you look at the history, it was essentially codified during the Industrial Revolution. It is quite literally a factory line blueprint meant to churn out predictable workers and reliable consumers. The school bell was actually designed to train you for the factory bell.
That is a phenomenal context to remember. It's
Mm.
basically an economic tool, not a psychological one.
Exactly. So the question you have to ask yourself tonight is, why are we letting an obsolete industrial era economic blueprint dictate our personal self-worth today? Why are we grading our souls on a 19th century factory rubric?
We shouldn't be. Your future doesn't have to look anything like your past or society's factory line to be profoundly meaningful.
Thank you so much for being part of this conversation today. We hope that the next time you sit in a quiet moment, staring at a coffee cup, you realize that the silence doesn't mean your story is over. It just means you get to write the next chapter on your own terms.
Take care of yourselves out there.
We'll catch you next time on the Living Better podcast.